some interesting things in here that we have to, challenges we have to go through, because some of them just don't seem to make a lot of sense to us. And I know because I studied it and I understand. The title this morning, don't want it to, moving on, part of God's blessing for us. Now don't take from this title that anybody's moving anywhere. I'm not going anywhere. I trust you are not either. But we have to understand that sometimes God does do that. And sometimes it comes a point when someone has to move on, whether it's moving locations, whether it's moving jobs, whether it's one of those types of situations. Jacob found himself in that situation. Now let's remind ourselves a little bit. He has been serving Laban for about, the next chapter tells us, about 20 years. 7 years for 2 wives, and then 6 years for the flocks. 20 years he's been living in the shadows of not only his father-in-law, his employer, who's also not a very nice employer. As we'll see, as we've already seen, if you keep score from when we looked earlier in the chapters, but we'll see even more later. This guy is not a nice guy. I mean, you think you have a bad boss? At least you don't have Laban. This is a guy who is willing to, on more than one occasion, not only steal from his own son-in-law, but in essence, steal from his children and grandchildren. This is the kind of guy Laban was. There was no nepotism with Laban. Laban was out for one person and one person only, and that was him. And it's bad. We don't see it so much here. Here we see God's working, God's wonderful grace. Next chapter, we'll still see God's grace, but we'll see Laban's nastiness come out even more next week. He's manipulative, he's nasty in every sense of the word. But yet God has used Laban to train Jacob because Jacob himself had some pretty messed up things. This is the same guy who was willing to steal from his own brother more than once. This was the same guy that was willing to lie to his blind father to get what he wanted. So Jacob really needed some training, and Jacob really needed to take something. And God sent Laban to correct Jacob. Well, Jacob has grown through that. And now we see Jacob for these 20 years, for the most part, has been very, very honorable. Has done everything in an ethical way. And now he's brought to this point. All of his work he had done, he had nothing to show for it. He had his wife and his children, but he had nothing really to take care of them with. Everything he had was Laban's. You might feel that way. You might feel that you're spinning your wheels. Well, Laban felt that way. We may have felt that we've worked hard and we're spinning our wheels and little to show for it, but we can rest in the fact that God is in control. And for those who've trusted Him, He loves you very much. And we can rest in the fact that if we seek Him, whether He keeps us in our current situation or moves us on, or whether He blesses us differently in our current situation or blesses us in a way we don't expect, and we're in His will, He will put us where He wants us, and He will bless us, and He will provide for us. So moving on. Part of God's blessing. We'll look at 2 major things. Number 1, God's people can anticipate His continued faithfulness in their lives. And then number 2, God's people enjoy God's blessing often in spite of deception and schemes against them.